Annyeonghaseyo, this is meowmurai. Let's continue our game of Despera Drops running on Nintendo Switch 2. The shore was so close, yet so far. All I could do was clutch his arm so we wouldn't get separated and try to catch my breath so I wouldn't drown.
Mika!
I almost lost my grip, but Rami quickly grabbed my hand. His emotions flowed into my mind all at once. His intense desire for me to survive and his fear of losing me drove him to pick me up. With how much water he choked down and how heavy I was, he felt he might drown at any moment, yet he held me in his arms, trying his hardest to save me. It would have been easier for him to swim alone, but he still pushed onward with me in tow. Amid the treacherous, ice-cold waters, I found my sole solace in the warmth of his arms. After a long time of being tossed about by the river, we reached the shore around nightfall. I planted my hands on the earth and sucked in lungfuls of air, my whole body heaving. We had survived. We hadn't drowned. Neither of us had the energy or strength to rejoice in it, though. Oh, we found a cave. It's just like when we were with Camu. Rami staggered back to his feet, trudging to the cave to protect us from the fierce winds. I was terrified he would collapse.
Rami-kun!
Rami passed out, panting and pale-faced. Carrying me down the river must have sapped all his energy. Although it was summer, the sun had long since set. The whipping winds against our wet bodies made us terribly cold. We might even get sick at this rate. I dragged Rami's unconscious body to the cave he'd pointed out so we could shelter ourselves from the wind. Austria, Mountain, August 1st, 2028, 22:28, Tuesday, cave. Cave. I managed to get us to the cave, but it barely kept us out of the elements, especially when our clothes were drenched. What should I do? I had absolutely no idea what to do next. I didn't even know how far away the river had taken us. I took out my phone to at least check our location, but my screen was pitch black. It must have gotten damaged when we submerged. I borrowed Rami's phone, but the result was the same. This meant we couldn't even contact the others. I was at my wit's end, and Rami had yet to regain consciousness. Every inch of me felt heavy and exhausted after being in the water for so long. But staying still wouldn't improve our situation either. I thought long and hard about what to do, wringing out my wet clothes as best I could. I remember learning somewhere that you should take off your clothes in a situation like this in case you get hypothermia. We'd been in the water for quite a while. If we didn't do something about the cold, our lives would be in danger. The thing was, we didn't have any spare clothes to change into. I didn't know whether it was better to be naked or keep your clothes on. Rami moaned, his face twisting in pain. His breast became shallow as he writhed on the ground. After much deliberation, I decided to leave his wet clothes on. I decided leaving his wet clothes on would only leach his body heat. I reached out to peel them off for him. One by one, I slowly pulled away the frigid garments clinging to his clothes. But with how many layers he wore, it wasn't as easy as it looked. In doing this, I noticed once more that only his fingertips were exposed. Despite it being summer, he was covered from head to toe. He had all these layers. I'd never realized just how many there were. Feeling strange, I unzipped his vest and took off his undershirt. My hand stopped the moment I saw his skin. Huh? Rami's body was riddled with scars. What are these? They weren't fresh wounds from our time in the river. These were old scars that had long since healed. All of them looked awful, though. Some were burn marks, like he'd been seared with a red-hot iron. Others looked like whipping scars. It was so heartbreaking to behold. I was rendered speechless. What had he been through that left him with all these injuries? His eyelids fluttered and he violently shook off my hand. Rami jumped back like a wild animal whose wounds had been touched. He glared at me in the darkness, his eyes filled with fear and rejection. Rami softly murmured my name, the tension ebbing from his body. Who on earth had he confused me for? And whoever they were, did they have something to do with his scars? Rami snapped to his senses, snatched the clothes I'd removed, and tugged them back on. I could see the confusion in his eyes. He knew that I had seen his scars. Pretending not to have seen anything, I shifted my attention to our surroundings. Rami didn't say anything. He should have realized I'd seen his scars, but he didn't confirm it with me, nor did he blame me for taking off his clothes without his permission. Rami chuckled, sounding bright as usual. I tried to act like normal in return. Rami rambled on with obviously forced cheer. He really didn't want anyone to know about his old wounds. Feeling guilty, I nodded. I gathered some dry tree branches from nearby. I didn't know how to build a fire, nor did I have a lighter or matches on me. Even if I had, they would have been wet and unusable. Rami slowly got back to his feet, his voice calm. He piled up the branches I'd collected, adding some fallen leaves and surrounding them with rocks. He then took out a survival knife from the pouch at his waist. Rami twisted the handle, pulling out something that resembled a metal stick. He put the back of the knife against the stick, then flicked the blade. Sparks ignited from the friction, setting the dead leaves alight. The flames spread to other branches, creating a bonfire. Wait, he used to sleep outside? As much as I wanted him to elaborate, the awkwardness from earlier kept me from doing so. We faced each other, watching the bonfire. The pretty flames dancing in the night looked almost magical. Neither of us said a word for some time. I let my mind wander back to the scars on his body. How had he gotten those injuries? What had happened to Rami? Should I just keep quiet about it? Still, I couldn't help but be concerned, not out of idle curiosity, but because I was worried about him. I was reminded of the time he was tormented by nightmares in that hostel back in Thun. I wondered what sort of life he'd lived. Even if I wanted to know, it was obviously a touchy subject. I stayed quiet, unsure if it was my place to inquire. The fire slowly dried our clothes. Unfortunately, the wind blowing in from the river had chilled us so much it was difficult to warm back up.
Mika.
Rami smiled at me from across the bonfire, the flames flickering in his gentle gaze. His pain and awkwardness from earlier had vanished. He watched me with a tranquil expression.
どうしたの？その格好じゃ寒くない？
I was. Both my arms were so cold I was shivering, my shoulders especially so, since I had on a sleeveless dress.
少しだけ
Rami stood up to that. Oh, Rami stood up at that. Scooching closer to me, he hugged me from behind.
僕は長袖だし、もうほとんど乾いたからね。だから、こうして風よけになってあげるよ。
Rami whispered his intentions into my ear. Rather than calling this a hug, I suppose it was essentially my human windbreaker. I felt no warmth. Rami avoided touching me as he shielded me from the wind. Judging by his timid and reserved gesture, I got the impression that he was afraid to get too close. Come to think of it, when I grabbed his arm a while back, he immediately shook me off. I didn't think too deeply about it at the time. I know, we get a little glimpse into his past and why he's so touchy about being touched. So maybe he was pushing himself to do this now. I ventured at a glance over my shoulder.
私なら大丈夫だよ。焚き火で少しずつ体が温まってきたし。
僕も大丈夫だよ。もしかしてこういうの迷惑だった？
少し休憩しましょうか。これで OK？
I mean, my main concern is he's pushing himself.
ラミー君、もしかして無理してない？
I faintly sensed his confusion and fear simmering behind me.
そう見える。
His question was tinged with sadness.
ちょっとだけ。
His hand trembled at my response.
そっか。やっぱり君には分かっちゃうんだね。
He muttered those words with a sad sigh.
別に無理なんてしなくてもいいんだよ。
でもさ、君のためだったらちょっとくらい無理したいんだ。迷惑。
Rami tightened his hold just a little. He tentatively hugged me from behind, trying to warm me up even more.
ありがとう、ラミー君。
I had so many questions, like where his scars came from and why he hated being touched. And yet, both of us kept our silence as we watched the fire burn. I'd been swept away by the water for so long that even now I still felt submerged. The quiet night stretched on. Oh, we had a side episode? Oh, I didn't know this game came with side episodes. Okay, well, that didn't seem like the right decision. I mean, it sort of was okay. I can feel your kindness, Rami?
ラミー君の優しさを感じる。
I mean, they're all good answers, that's the thing. While I couldn't feel his body heat, his kindness alone warmed my heart.
別に僕は優しくなんてないよ。今だって自分のやりたいことをしてるだけだし。
Rami might have put it that way, but the fact that he was able to do what he wanted for someone else's sake proved his kindness and strength.
自分のやりたいことだとしても、こういうことができるっていうのはすごいと思うよ。
君は僕のことを褒めすぎだって。
Rami chuckled quietly. He seemed pleased.
そんなことないよ。だってラミー君って自分よりも誰かを優先することが結構あるじゃない。それは優しいからだよ。
そんなことないと思うけどな。それにこんなこと誰にでもしたいって思うわけじゃないから。
I mean, now that I see them together, I guess they are like kind of a cute pairing, right? I mean, everybody else would be a little awkward. I think. Especially when we were with Kamu, it was like, it doesn't really work with these two. But I think Rami and Mika are I think they work okay, yeah.
ミカだから特別だよ。
Rami tightened his hold just a little. He tentatively hugged me from behind, trying to warm me up even more.
ありがとうラミー君。
I had so many questions, like where his scars came from and why he hated being touched. And yet both of us kept our silence as we watched the fire burn. I'd been swept away by the water for so long that even now I still felt submerged. The quiet night stretched on. Okay, that's a little better. We actually got some points out of that one. We're getting like a little bit more romance in there. The sound of rustling bushes woke me up with a start. It seemed I'd fallen asleep. The bonfire had gone out. It was still dark. Rami's warmth had vanished from my back. I spun around, wondering where he was, and felt a hand slip over my mouth.
動かないで。
Huh? I didn't sense anything, but Rami was right in front of me. He was on high alert. He narrowed his eyes at the darkness, bristling like a cat. A few moments later, he slowly and soundlessly picked me up. Looking at his serious gaze, I held my breath. With me in his arms, Rami left the cave and climbed a nearby tree. The leaves helped hide us. A split second later, I heard footfalls from below. The light came closer, shining into the cave where we'd only just taken shelter.
火を焚いた跡があります。ここで休んだのは間違いないかと。
Ah, they're right behind us.
見つからないと思ったら、こんなに下流まで流されていたのか。周囲を探せ。はっ。
The agents in black who'd come for us searched the forest. I broke into a cold sweat, fearing they'd find us. Rami's gaze stayed calm as he held me. He smiled to assure me everything would be all right.
おい、こっちに足跡があったぞ。また川を下ったようですね。ハウススチュワードを呼びますか。
Oh, I don't think it's so much that Rami is like strong. I get the impression that Miku is a very, very tiny, light girl. But point taken, he is able to kind of carry everybody around.
いや、彼にはチャンセラーが別の命令を下されていた。我々だけで追うぞ。
I heard a series of splashes as they entered the river, along with the sound of a boat engine coming to life. I realized they were crossing the river. The engine and the lights receded into the distance. We stayed in our spot until the sound of the boat completely disappeared. Rami sighed, then climbed down the tree.
もう大丈夫だね。
よかった。
Relief washed over me upon knowing they had left without finding us. That said, I did have a question.
どうして私たちが川を下ったと思ったんだろう。
そりゃそういう跡を残しといたからね。
そうだったの？
ミカが寝ちゃった後にちゃちゃっとね。ま、追われるのには慣れてるからさ。てか僕が普通にしてて足跡残すはずないじゃん。
With a proud smile, Rami turned his gaze towards the river. He pointed out 2 makeshift sets of footprints, plus signs of someone entering the water.
すごい。
ドジ踏んで警備員に追われた時とか、わざと違う方向に痕跡を残してやり過ごしてたんだ。あいつらも同じ手に引っかかるとはな。
Chased by security? He must have been referring to his past break-ins. Assuming it'd be best not to pry, I thought about where we should go from here. As long as those agents were after us, we had no time to relax.
それでこれからどうする？
もう一回木の上に登ってそこで朝まで過ごす？なんて冗談だよ。僕は平気だけどミカが落ちちゃいそうだし。
Oh, he was joking.
でもそのホラー穴じゃまた誰かに見つかるかもしれないし。 新しいねぐら探しに行こっか。
Rami smiled mischievously, walking off towards the mountains. I trotted after him so we wouldn't get separated. Just in case the agents doubled back to our initial shelter, we opted to venture deep into the mountains and sleep against a tree trunk. A few nearby birds took flight. The abrupt flapping of wings startled me to the point of shaking. Rami laughed at my reaction.
びっくりしすぎ。大丈夫？
でも夜の森って不気味だね。
でも下手な街中より安全だよ。酔っ払いとかもいないしさ。
He has a point there. The moment he mentioned downtown, the scenery of all the cities we'd escaped to flashed through my mind. Were the others staying at some inn or hostel we'd already visited? I found myself worrying about all sorts of things. Maybe my mind was clearer after my nap in the cave. I was concerned about our companions, but beyond that, I wanted to know why Rami came to my rescue.
ねえラミー君、あの時どうやって助けに来てくれたの？あの列車には私一人で乗り込んだのに。
インスブルックで飛び乗ったんだ。ほら、先回りして待ってるって言ったじゃん。だからみんなで移動して待ってたんだ。でも追いかけてきたハウススチュワードに襲われてさ。
そうなの？
そう。しかも列車も止まらないしですっごい焦ったよ。このままじゃきっと君が連れ去られちゃうって思ってさ。みんなが足止めしてくれてる隙に僕だけ列車に飛び乗ったんだ。その後みんなが車で逃げるとこが見えたから多分全員無事だと思うよ。
そうだったんだ。ありがとうラミー君。
Had Robbie not come to my rescue, Chancellor would have whisked me away to Liechtenstein by now. I was too terrified to imagine what might have happened to me after that.
まあね。でもほんと飛び乗ってよかったよ。あいつら返す気全然なかったじゃん。なんとかミカを連れ出せてよかった。と言ってもミカしか助けらんなかったけど。
Rami's gaze darkened. He was thinking about Crystal.
僕がもっとアッシュの兄貴みたいに強ければクリステルも連れて逃げられたのかな。
ごめんね。
なんでミカが謝んのさ。
私もラミー君みたいに身軽で一人で逃げられたらラミー君がクリステルを助けられたのかもって思って。
そんなことないよ。僕がもっと強ければよかったんだ。もっと力があれば。
His lamentations on lacking strength and capability continued, but frankly these if-onlys were pointless. What really mattered was what we could do here and now.
チャンセラーは私もクリステルのこともまだ利用するって言ってたの。
I told them what I'd heard on the train. Their claim to have no further use for Crystal was a lie to make us desperate. They never intended to kill her in the first place. Crystal was Chancellor's biological daughter. Both Helliger and Acolyte were vital to their plans. Hence, they would pursue us relentlessly.
実の娘？クリステルがチャンセラーの。
こんなの許せないよ。自分の娘を利用するなんて。
僕も許せないよ。なんでそんなひどいこと。
チャンセラーはリヒテンシュタインのあの城へ行くって話してたの。多分クリステルもそこにいる。
Yeah, it would be funny that I have like an alternate version, like they did with like robotics notes and some other like popular visual novels, or the many alternate Steins Gate games.
だから私たちだけでクリステルを助けに行けないかな。
Crystal had been living in a bubble until we came along. I'd never forget the way her eyes lit up when she saw the outside world. Rami and I were the only ones who could rescue her.
同じこと考えてた。
Rami agreed to my suggestion with a smile.
実の娘だとしても、あんな奴らのとこには置いておけないよ。だから必ず助けに行こう。朝になったらさ。
Thinking we needed to sleep and top our energy by morning, we sat side by side beneath a tree and closed our eyes, hoping to get some rest. I was still completely drained. Sleepiness took hold of me in no time, and I began to doze off. Rami groaned beside me, waking me right up. He was clenching his jaw in his sleep, clearly in agony. He'd broken out in a cold sweat. Was he having a nightmare?
ラミー君、大丈夫？
Too worried to think better of it, I shook his shoulder. His eyes shot open as he jerked away from me. It was merely a slight touch, but his reaction made it seem like I'd overdone it. He really hated being touched. His palpable waves of fear reminded me of the scars I'd seen on his body. I glanced sidelong at Rami. He awkwardly gazed back at me with a troubled expression.
ごめんね。悪夢を見てるみたいだったから。
僕こそごめん。別に平気だから。
うん。
After a long, long silence, Rami finally opened up.
あのさ、さっきのことなんだけど。
He took a deep breath, gripping his collar tightly.
僕の体見ちゃったよね。
Unable to bring myself to lie, I nodded.
ごめんなさい。
大丈夫だよ。別に子供の頃の傷だし、もう痛まないし、全然平気。
Rami said he was fine, but his face told me otherwise. He looked like he didn't know what kind of expression to make, what kind of lie to spin. He was most definitely not fine, to the point where he couldn't even lie. I chose my next words very carefully to avoid hurting him.
あのね、ラミー君。私、自分のこの力のことを誰かに話したのって、あの日が初めてだったの。
I stared down at my hands, recalling the past. Now that I thought about it, we'd also spent the night in the mountains back then. Bolstered by the courage everyone had given me that day, I pressed on.
それまでずっと誰にも話さなかったの。力があることを隠して、他人の心を見ないように手袋をして、でもたまに人の気持ちを見てしまって、その度に傷ついて。でもあの日、みんなが、ラミー君が私を受け止めてくれて、すごく気が楽になったんだ。だから。
Smiling, I met Rami's gaze.
もしラミー君が一人で抱えてるのが重くなった時はいつでも私に話してほしい。もちろんみんなみたいに頼りにならないのは自分で分かってるけど、それでも頼ってほしい。ラミー君はいつでも私たちのことを気遣って和ませたり楽しませてくれたんだから、時々は子供みたいに甘えてもらえたら嬉しいな。別にラミー君のことを子供みたいだって言ってるわけじゃないよ。
My speech derailed, and I started to feel embarrassed. At this rate, Rami might not get what I was trying to say.
ミカ。
His lips quirked up into a smile, one so faint it made him seem wistful and lonely.
参ったな。そんな風に言われたら、本当に甘えたくなっちゃうじゃん。
甘えていいんだよ。
無理だよ。僕、甘え方わかんないもん。 誰かに甘えたことなんてない初心者だからさ。いきなり甘えろって言われても、どうしたらいいかわかんないし。ねえ、甘えるってどうやんの？
His sincere gaze was fixed on me. He generally didn't seem to know how to be selfish with someone else.
どうやるんだろう。
To be fair, it was a difficult concept to put into words. Ever since my mom died, I'd slowly stopped relying on other people. My dad never knew about my power. I'd always been hesitant about revealing it to him, afraid that the only family I had left would reject me. Or rather, I was afraid I might accidentally peek into his heart if I got too close. I feared learning something I didn't want to know. The more I distanced myself from him, the more my stepmother despised me. I could no longer depend on anyone. All of that helped me understand why Rami struggled with the idea.
なんだ、ミカもわかんないんじゃん。変なの。
Rami chuckled, then timidly gripped the hem of my skirt.
じゃあ、ここ、掴んでてもいいかな。
Maybe this was as spoiled as he could be right now. He didn't hug me or rest his head on my lap. That alone proved he'd never asked for someone to indulge him before.
なんだか、ミカってママみたいだな。
Something he said a long time ago resurfaced in my mind. I still remember the hint of envy in his eyes. He spoke like someone who'd never had a mother. I had an idea as to why that was the case, and Rami confirmed my suspicions.
実はさ、僕、生まれてすぐに親に捨てられたみたいなんだ。
I had no words. Rami laughed it off like it was no big deal.
だから、甘えるってよくわからないんだよ。せっかく言ってくれたのにごめんな。
私こそ。
謝るのはなしだよ。
Before I could apologize, Rami raised his finger to stop me from doing so.
生きてて、ご飯も食べられる。だから今は幸せなんだ。自由だってあるしさ。だから、ミカが気にする必要ないんだ。ね。
I tentatively nodded. Rami's eyes crinkled as he dredged up memories of the past.
僕さ、孤児院で育ったんだ。ラミーってのも、孤児院の先生がつけてくれたんだよ。
名前も？
そう。だから僕、自分の本当の名前も、本当の誕生日も、親の顔も、何も知らないんだよね。まあ、生まれてすぐに捨てられたんじゃ、そもそも名前なんてなかったのかもしれないけどさ。だけど、それが不幸だって思ったことはないよ。育ててくれたのも悪い孤児院じゃなかったからさ。結構楽しく過ごしてたんだ。ま、ラミーってのが昔孤児院で飼ってた猫の名前だったって知った時はちょっと拗ねたけどさ。でも、いいとこだったんだ。
Oh, he really is a cat. Named after a cat.
でも、結局経営不振でその孤児院は、僕が物心ついて3年目ぐらいに潰れちゃった。それからは、孤児院で一緒に育った奴らとゴミ捨て場を漁ったりして、路上で暮らしてたんだ。
路上って？
別に珍しいことじゃないよ。路上で暮らしてる奴なんてゴロゴロいる。街で見たことない？
I was taken aback by his nonchalant response.
正しい行為をしたって不幸じゃ意味ない。エルマーだってそう思うだろ。みんなと一緒にいられるのが一番だよな。
Yeah, that does explain a lot. I mean, it's what we were guessing. Rami's anger finally clicked for me. He was worried about Elmar, who had to part ways with his friends if the orphanage went out of business. Rami had experienced the same thing.
地下鉄の駅はあったかいから寒い日は潜り込んでさ、駅員に見つかって追い出されたり。でもスラム街には子供たちだけの隠れ家があったから、みんなで身を寄せ合って寝れば寒さもなんとかなった。だからそれなりに生きていけたんだよね。
Rami sounded so cheerful when speaking of the past, like he was reminiscing about his school days.
あの頃はほんとまずいもんばっか食ってたな。子供だったし盗みもまだ覚えてなくてさ。アッシュの兄貴やジブみたいに体格も良くないし強くもないから、できるのがゴミ漁りくらいで、残飯だけで必死に生き延びてたんだ。でも自分の逃げ足が速くて身軽なんだって気づいてからはスリの練習もした。観光客を集団で狙えばうまくいくってのも学んだ。たまに捕まって大人たちに殴られたりしたけどさ、仲間たちがいたから辛くなかったし、別にああいう暮らしも平気だったんだ。
その傷はその頃に？
Rami smiled in lieu of a response. Still smiling, he looked up at the sky.
スリ、泥棒、置き引き。盗めるものは何でも盗んできたよ。中途半端に金を盗むよりも、食べたいものを盗んだ方が効率いいことに気づいたり。楽しかったな。あの頃はまだ。
あの頃はまだ？
それよりいつもみたいに怒んないの？
He swiftly changed the subject, letting go of my skirt to hug his knees. It sounded like he was sweeping something under the rug.
いつもみたいに怒るって何？
スリしてたってとこ。犯罪はダメだーってミカが言うの。結構僕好きだったんだけど。
でもそれは。
Stealing was Rami's way of life. If he didn't do it, he couldn't get by. I wasn't going to chastise him for that. According to the law, crimes were objectively bad. But that was just the way the law said. Or that was just what the law said.
盗んできたことを後悔してないよ。怒られても反省しないし、きっとこれからもそうする。
Yeah, I think a lot of children, if they grow up even in a bad environment, they don't really. I mean, you would never know what it was like to be in a good environment, right? So your standard of what's good and bad is incredibly different. So, I mean, it's like there was always somebody at school that you knew that wasn't having a good time. That you could tell that their home life wasn't great, and maybe they were acting out, or maybe they were more insular. But there was always like something wrong, and like their worldview of what's fun and what's terrible, and how they got by in life, and how things are just going to be vastly different from somebody else who was raised in a good home. Like I said, I envy people who are raised in good homes. It's like don't really understand it. I have no idea what it would really be like. Yeah, like I totally get what Remy's saying.
でも、君が怒ってくれたら、悪いことをしているんだって自覚することができるんだ。ほんの少しだけ普通の人みたいになれた気がする。だから、いつもみたいに言ってよ。盗んじゃダメだよって。
少し休憩しましょうか。
I think we're okay with this answer, so. We've got... I can't possibly say that. That's not going to make him happy. I have no right to be mad at you. I will when you do something really bad. How about that one?
もちろん本当に悪いことをした時は怒るよ。
I doubted I could do something like that, but I'd give it a try that was what Rami wanted.
本当？信じていいの？あ、でも君が言う本当に悪いことってどんなの？
I hadn't thought that far.
病気のお年寄りから大切な思い出の品を盗んだり、小さな子供からお金を取ったりとかかな。
いや、それってただの最低野郎じゃん。いくら僕でもそこまでひどいことしないって。
うん、知ってる。だからそういう人として許せないようなことじゃなかったら私には怒れないかもしれない。
I couldn't be mad. No, I didn't have the right.
なんだかうまくごまかされた感じだな。それでも本当にダメな時はミカが怒ってくれるって信じているよ。
Ooh, good. Got some feathers.
ミカはそのままでいいんだよ。僕が君を守るから。君は僕の罪を叱る人でいてほしいんだ。
分かった。ラミー君がまたスリをしようとしたら絶対止める。ダメだよって怒るね。
ありがとう。
Rami smiled, looking unusually mature. Something about our promise had struck a chord with him. He claimed to have no regrets or remorse, yet he yearned for the balance and order of the world I came from. It gave me a better idea why this thief was so kind.
ずっとさ、死ぬもんかって思って生きてきたんだ。それだけが僕が幸せだって証明する唯一の方法だって思ってた。でも世の中には自由も幸福も笑って踏みつけられる奴らがいるんだ。人間を物よりも大切に扱わない奴らを僕はいっぱい知ってる。泥水をすすってまで必死に生きてた僕らを虫けらみたいに扱ってさ。同じ人間だって思ってないんだ。ああいう奴らは。クラウンの奴らもそれと同じだ。
Rami stared into the darkness, the void beyond the brush.
君を、クリステルを、あいつらは道具としか思っていない。人間の尊厳を平気で踏みにじってくる。カルロスも言ってたよな。追っていた事件の証人が川に浮いたり、証言を取り消して無罪が立証できなくなったりしたって。あんな奴らがこのヨーロッパで自分たちの好き勝手しているなんて絶対に認めない。クリステルを、子供を巻き込むなんて許せない。
Rami laid his emotions bare. His gaze was frigid, like his seething stemmed from personal experience. Dropping his smile, Rami made his vow.
だから必ずクリステルを助け出そう。
Promising to save the little girl come morning, we closed our eyes once more. From the bottom of my heart, I wished for her to be safe and sound. The next morning, Austria Mountain, August 2nd, 2028, 9:33, Wednesday, Highway. We headed down the mountain at dawn, then checked road signs to figure out where we were.
はあ、まさかこんなに流されてたとはな。
The mountain range was more than 5 kilometers south of Landurk, Austria. As for the river that carried us there, it was called the River Inn. We couldn't get our exact location with our phones, too damaged to use, but it seemed we were deep in the mountains about 100 kilometers from Liechtenstein.
こんなことならもっとリヒテンシュタインの近くで飛び降りればよかったよ。
We set off for Liechtenstein, doing our best to avoid detection. Several minutes later, Rami strode in the middle of the road, waving his hands to flag down anyone who might give us a ride.
おーい
ラミー君、大丈夫？
平気。たく、なかなか止まってくんないな。
やっぱり歩いていかない？指名手配犯だってバレるかもしれないし。
歩いてったら何時間かかるかわかんないだろ。平気だって。僕たち平凡な兄弟にしか見えないからさ。
Do we? We're clearly two different nationalities. Rami started jumping as high as he could to get any car to stop. Right then, a truck braked beside us. A kindly old man popped his head out the window.
なんだこんなところで。
The very loud old man.
おっちゃん、トラックの荷台に乗せてよ。
坊主に嬢ちゃんか。あんたらまだ子供に見えるが、でか？
そうだよ。父ちゃんが殴るからさ。妹と一緒に親戚のばあちゃん家に行くんだ。
Rami lied as easily as he breathed. He was serious about carrying out the whole siblings plan. The man grimaced. I took that to mean he'd bought our story.
ばあちゃん家はどこにあるってんだ？
リヒテンシュタインの田舎だよ。マルブンの方。
ほりゃえらく遠くまで行くな。悪いがわしはこれからこの干し草を牧場に運ばなきゃならんからな。
じゃあ途中まででいいよ。次はまた別の車ヒッチハイクするから。だからお願い。途中まで荷台に乗せてってくんない？
そうかそうか。それでいいならほれ乗ってけ。つってもお嬢ちゃんの方は大丈夫か？荷台は揺れるぞ。
はい、大丈夫です。ありがとうございます。
Well, I guess they could be, like, adopted siblings. You know, they don't have to be natural-born siblings. And just like that, Rami schmoozed his way onto getting us a free ride. He bonded with the old man in no time, to the point that he could ask for food. When the man found out we were hungry, he generously gave us the sandwiches he'd made for lunch. It dawned on me that I hadn't eaten a thing since yesterday, and for that very reason the farmer's humble sandwich tasted like heaven on earth.
人間は食べないといつか死ぬんだ。お腹が空いてて食べ物が目の前にあってそれでも食べないなんていう贅沢なわがまま、僕は絶対認めたくないから。だからミカ、君も食べなくちゃダメだ。
I was reminded of what Rami told me once before. At the time, I didn't want to eat stolen food. It wasn't that I would rather starve than commit a crime, but my aversion to theft was stronger than my appetite. Now that I'd spent my life as a fugitive and heard about Rami's past, I realized how naive I'd been.
うまかった。じいちゃん、サンドイッチありがとな。すっげえうまかった。マジ命の恩人だよ。
I know it's super late, but a sandwich does sound good.
大げさだなお前さんは。
いや大げさでもなんでもないって。マジで僕今幸せだよ。
Whenever, wherever, Rami was always smiling. He never let his years of suffering and resentment show. He lived fully in the present, enjoying every moment. His strength and his smile inspired me to follow suit. Austria Mountain, August 2nd, 2028, 12:28 Wednesday, Road. We hitchhiked in several different vehicles, reaching the area outside Liechtenstein without issue. And then...
本当にこのトラックに忍び込むの？
Rami was about to sneak into the back of a truck that had happened to stop on the roadside.
そろそろヒッチハイクだと足がつきそうだしさ、目撃情報になったら嫌じゃん？それにさっきこのトラックの人、 リヒテンシュタイン行きの荷物積み込んでたし、ちょうどいいじゃん。
それはそうなんだけど、バレないかな。
じっとしてれば平気平気。案外バレないもんだよ。
He said it as though he'd done it countless times before. Maybe he really had.
どう？今だ。行くよ。
Yeah, I'm sure we look and smell terrible. There's no way we're like presentable hitchhikers. You know. Before the driver climbed into the car to start the engine, Rami picked the lock of the attached trailer. He slipped aside like a cat, then extended his hand to me.
ほら早く。
As I hesitated over whether to take it, he grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. I wasn't entirely sure, but I thought I felt his hand tremble. His emotions began flowing into me. Among those emotions, a color flickered in my mind's eye, one akin to deep sorrow. The inside of the trailer was pitch black. The only sound was the occasional thump of shifting cardboard boxes whenever the vehicle shook. Contrary to my expectations, the trailer's interior was quite spacious. Even though I couldn't stretch my legs, it didn't feel cramped at all.
段ボールと段ボールの隙間、あってよかったね。
そうだね。ラミー君は大丈夫？狭くない？
平気平気。快適だよ。
His chuckle tickled my ear, assuring me he was close by. Rami had always been good at hiding his presence. When he stayed still, I couldn't help but worry whether he was really there.
怖い？
ちょっとだけ。真っ暗で何も見えないし、ラミー君はどこにいるかわからないから。
大丈夫。ここにいるよ。
ラミー君には見えてるの？
見えてるよ。もともと嫁は聞く方だしね。ミカは見えてないの？
うん。全然見えない。
そっか。それでそんな不安そうな顔してるんだ。
His closed breast prompted me to look up in surprise, only to bump my nose on something. My eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness, until I saw Rami's face right in front of mine.
やっと気づいた？
いつからそこにいたの？
ここにいるよって言った時から。
Rami smirked, a mischievous glint in his eye. He was so cat-like, always. He could see in the dark, and he scarcely made a sound.
全然気づかないんだもん。本当に見えてないんだね。
You know, some people don't have good night vision. I'm fairly certain most people can't see in the dark.
こうしてれば怖くない？
Rami grinned, looking wholly unbothered by the fact that his face was mere inches from mine. But I'd never been this close to a man before. I was feeling so shy I didn't know what to do. The truck jolted, shaking the cargo and nudging us even closer. We were so close now that even the slightest movement would close the gap between us. I held my breath. Meanwhile, Rami was calm and collected. He peered curiously into my face, skillfully balancing himself all the while.
どうしたの？
顔が近いから。
え？あ。
Rami jerked away in a flash. He melted into the darkness, and I lost track of him once more.
ごめん。調子に乗ってつい近づきすぎちゃった。
I could just make out Rami sitting beside me. He hugged his knees, dropping his gaze to his feet. I think this is my first time seeing him like this. The conversation we had in Thun suddenly came to mind.
お子様が迷子になる前に今日は一緒に帰ろっか。僕が面倒見てやらないと危なっかしいしさ。
お子様ってラミー君の方が年下でしょ？
へえ、僕の方が年上だと思うけどな。ま、どうでもいいか。それじゃ一緒ってことで。
He called me a toddler. Even when we pretended to be siblings, I acted like his younger sister. Maybe he doesn't even see me as a grown woman. For some odd reason, that made my heart ache. I held my own knees and snuck a sidelong glance at Rami. Huh? He sat cross-legged with his legs bouncing up and down, looking both unnerved and embarrassed. Seeing this expression of his for the first time was so fresh and exciting that I couldn't help but stare. Rami turned to me, perhaps noticing my eyes on him.
何？
ラミ君、そういう表情もするんだって思って。
疲れたから少し休もっか。これでいいかな。
Okay, we are approaching the hour, so why don't we stop there? This is meowmurai. You've been watching Despera Drops, running on Nintendo Switch 2.
デスペラドロップス。
Yeah, Rami does seem younger than Mika. I mean, it just... it wouldn't make sense for Rami to be older. But yeah, if the official website says that, then yeah, that's a good confirmation. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.